Hey guys, welcome to the Hacked Existence tutorial on assembling the PhreakMe badge from DefCon 32. So by the end of this video, I'll show you guys how to take the badge kit. We'll assemble all of the different components onto the board. And basically what this thing does is historically accurate tones from phone systems throughout history. So this will basically let you hear what vintage phone systems sounded like from all over the world. So let's jump into the bill of materials. Okay, so this is our bill of materials. We're going to start with the bottom board here. And in case you can't tell, these were manufactured by PCBWay. So these guys were awesome to work with. They were super responsive, walked us through the whole process. They expedited the shipping so we could get them here on time to get to you guys at the conference. So we're going to start with this bottom board, and the first thing we're going to solder on is the resistor. That's going to go into R1 here. So I'm just going to bend it over and put the two legs through the holes. Push it down so it's nice and flat on that board, and we'll fold the tails back over, solder those on, and cut the excess. Alright, so now that we've got our resistor all soldered on, the next step is going to be to solder on the LED, and we need to understand that the longer pin is the anode, that's the positive side. The shorter pin is the cathode, that's the negative side. So the polarity matters. We need to make sure that we line up our anode, our positive side, with the plus, and the shorter cathode with the minus. So we'll go ahead and insert that LED. We'll hold it up against the board and fold the tails down, and then we'll solder those on and cut off the excess. Alright, now that we've got our LED all soldered onto there, the next thing that we're going to solder on is the keypad connector. This is an 8-pin 90-degree connector. You can see there's a short side and a long side. So we're going to take that short side and we're going to go to the front of the board here, and we're going to drive it through the U2 connector. We'll flip it over and solder all 8 pins on. Alright, the next thing that we're going to solder on is the reset button. It's going to go to this SW2. We're just going to push it in from the front like that, flip it over, and we'll solder these 4 pins in. Alright, with our reset button nice and flush mounted on the front there, the next piece is going to be these capacitors. They're going to go to C1 and C2, and you'll notice once again these are polarized, so we have a positive and a negative side. We need to make sure we get those right. On the capacitors themselves, this symbol here tells you this is the negative side, which is the shorter leg, the positive side being the longer leg. So we're going to make sure we get the polarity right, drive those 2 capacitors in, fold them over, flip it over, solder it, and cut off the excess. Alright, the next thing that we're going to install is the inductor. We're going to install that into this L1 here, and we're just going to put one leg through each one of the holes, get it all nice and flat in there, fold the legs over, solder them on, and cut off the excess. Alright, the next thing we're going to install is the potentiometer. You can see it's got 3 pins here in a triangle shape, and that's going to go into this RW1 on the board. So there's only one way that it'll fit in there because it's keyed. And basically, this is going to allow you to adjust the contrast on the display. So when you fire this thing up, if you don't see any text on the screen, you're going to use a screwdriver to turn that dial there to adjust the contrast. Alright, the next piece to install is the crossover capacitor. It's going to go into C3 here, and we're just going to drive the 2 legs through, fold them over, solder them, and cut them off. Alright, next up is the Arduino socket. There are 2 of these. They are 12 pins each, and we're going to place them here to act as a socket that the Arduino can then plug into. So we'll put them face up on the board here, and then I'll flip this over and we'll solder in all 24 of these pins on the bottom. Alright, so with the Arduino headers, it's very important that we get these completely perpendicular to the board. You can see these are not lined up, they're not flat, and they're not straight perpendicular. So a trick I like to use is I solder the first pin on each side, and then what I'm going to do is set it sideways, and I'm going to heat up that pin and push the socket to where I want it to be. And that one looks pretty good there. I'll do it with the bottom one as well. Alright, now we've got a nice flat perpendicular mount, so I'll go ahead and solder up the rest of these. All right, the next thing that we're going to install is the power switch. There's only 2 pins on it. They line up to these 2 holes here. You can see where off and on is. Make sure I put the power switch in the off position first. Stick those through the hole there, flip it over, and solder these pins on. And again, I'm going to solder 1 pin and check the placement. Make sure this is all lined up nice. Heat it up if it's not. Place it into where you want it. And then solder the 2nd pin. All right, the next thing we're going to solder in is the speaker jack. This is optional. You don't need this, but it's going to go into this J2 here. You can take note of positive and negative. It doesn't matter where you screw this in, but later on it's going to matter when we plug the speaker in. This just makes it convenient, but you can also just wire the speaker straight to these 2 holes here. All right, the next thing we're going to solder on is the display socket. This is a 16-pin socket, and it's going to go up here that the display is going to plug into. So we'll drive it through from the front, flip it over, and solder it from the back. All right, so our board is almost complete. We're going to set that aside now, and we're going to start on the Arduino. So these come with 2 sets of 12-pin headers. And we're going to drive the short side in from the bottom of the Arduino up through the top. And then we'll solder all of these pins in. And again, you can use the solder a single pin trick and then heat it up and get those pins nice and perpendicular. They've got to be able to plug directly into that socket. All right, so at this point, our Arduino Pro Micro is all soldered up, and our kits come with the firmware pre-flashed, so you don't need to do anything more. We can now plug this into the socket on the board with the USB port facing down towards the bottom of the board. All right, the next step is to get the display wired up. So we've got this 16-pin header, and we're going to push this small side in from the bottom of the board and solder across the top of here. All right, now that we've got our display ready to go, we're going to build the mount for it. So I'm going to use 4 of these screws, and I'm going to use these 4 medium-sized spacers. I'm going to drive the screws in from the bottom of the board and put the spacers on top, and the display will mount to the top of that. And when you're installing these, you only need to hand tighten them. You don't need to torque them way down. All right, and then the display will just plug into the top of that. And you can see these holes line up, so we're going to use these spacers now and put these in next. All right, next we're going to install the speaker. It comes with some sticky tape on here, so I'll peel this back and place it where the speaker is with the wires coming out the side to the left. And now we'll run the speaker wires, recalling that the top one here is the positive terminal and the bottom one here is the negative terminal, so we'll go red on top and black on the bottom. All right, the last thing we need to solder is the battery holder. So that's going to go on the back side. We'll notice the positive and negative, and that's going to align to the positive and negative markers there. I'm going to stick this through. And again, this comes with some sticky tape, so we'll peel this off, drive our 2 pins through, get it mounted nice on there, flip it over, and we'll solder these 2 pins in. All right, for the next step, we're going to use 2 of these screws and our large 2 spacers. We're going to have those spacers come up off of here, so I'll drive those screws in from the back side. All right, next we're going to plug in the keypad, and we want to put this upside down. We're going to plug it in like that so it can fold back over like this. All right, so at this point we need to adjust our potentiometer before we put the top case on and can't get to it anymore. So we're going to go ahead and put in the battery, paying attention again to the polarity. Negative goes to negative. We'll flip our switch to on, and we'll see this thing boots up and turns on, but you can't really see anything on the screen. So I'm going to use a screwdriver here to turn this dial until we can see the text. And there we go. I'll get it to a nice, good looking spot. About there. We'll turn it off, take the battery back out, and continue putting this back together. All right, finally we will add the top plate. And now we have 6 screws to put in. And now we're going to start with these 4 screws up here. All right, next we're going to use the 3D printed keypad holder here. So you can see there's a trough here for the wires to come through. So basically what we're going to do is take the keypad and place it into the socket here. Kind of press it into place. We'll fold this over. There's a nub here that's going to go into that hole. And then we can see the two screw holes line up here. We're going to put those two last screws into there. All right, now we'll put the battery back in, and again, paying attention to polarity. Kick it on. And at this point, you guys should have a fully functioning tone dialer. So now you can throw the lanyard on these hooks, on these rings here. So as always, stay tuned, and thanks for watching.